Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you this amazing gatefold mantle drape card. It's a gatefold with a belly band, so we'll slip that off quickly. It gatefolds open, but then inside it has this extra little element that folds back up. A little bit hard to show on a 2D video, but I'm going to bring in this handy dandy little box, which is going to be my make-believe mantle shelf. So you can see how it sits on and then it drapes like that. So this would be the gatefolds open and this little piece hangs down. So off the shelf, off the mantelpiece, wherever the recipient would like to share it, even on an end table, I suppose. So I had seen it done by a British lady, and of course they're all metric over there, us pesky European folk with our centimeters as well as inches. So, and it was also the sort of the bigger, the 5x7 sort of A2 metric size. So what I did was I converted it to our good old feet and inches. Well, not that we get many feet in stamping, but you know what I mean. I did it to inches. So this is how it looks. So what I'm going to do is I'll pop it off to one side. There's a little bit of tweaking because in order to get the flap up middle to fit, you almost have to slice it just a little bit less. So I've already done that with my strawberry slush piece I'm going to show you how to do it with. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a piece of basic white and I'm going to go through all the cutting sizes and the scoring. So we're going to line it up at 5.5. So it's a full sheet of cardstock, 8.5 by 11. Lined it up at 5.5 and scored it. So that's the first step. And then what we need to do in order for it to be a gatefold, it's usually 2 1/8 in from each side. But I'm going to do 2 1/8 and then I'm just going to go a hair's breadth over because it just needs that little bit of extra to be able to fold over the thickness of what's inside. So 2 1/8, and then before you even get to like the 16th, it's like half a 16th, so it's a 32nd. I know that sounds ridiculous and pedantic, but I tried it without and it really was a tight squeeze, or it left a gap up the middle of the card. So 2 1/8, and then just before you get to the next little notch, and then I'm going to score from the 5.5 score line up. And then we need to do that again, but the only way I could do it was to line it up at the bottom of my paper trimmer. So I'm going to 2 1/8 at the bottom, again halfway to the next mark, and then I'm going to put the scoring blade in at the 5.5 mark, trying not to get my head in the shot, and bring it down. So now we've got 5.5 scored and 2.5 plus a tick at either side. And then what I wanted to do was we've got to cut down from here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my snips and I am going to cut in to that point, to where 2 1/8 and its little bit was scored. Because then what we need to do, get just to that point, then we need to go back and do some cutting, and we need to go to 2 1/8, and we're going to go back to the score line. This time we're going to use the cutting blade. I'm just going to stand up so I'll be a little bit closer to my camera if you feel I'm shouting. Put the trimmer in and cut down so we get rid of that piece. And then again at the bottom we're going to go to 2 1/8 and put the cutting blade in at the score line and come down. So there is a little bit of jiggery pokery, let's call it that. So it makes it a little bit odd. And then what we need to do is we need to reduce this, because we scored it at 5.5 obviously each side is 5.5. So I'm going to bring in the edge. So we know this was the 5.5 line, and I'm going to bring it to 4.25. Sorry about that. I forgot I'd moved the paper trimmer up. So 4.25. And I'm actually going to cut that bottom piece off. So that is spare. And then I'm going to line it up at 2 1/8, because now this is 4.25 by 4.25 square. So I'm going to line it up at 2 1/8. Make sure I've moved the cutting blade out of the way and score it in half. So that should be all the measurements. And now we can see what needs to be tweaked. So we can fold that piece up. And then you see where it's wanting to fold over, there is a little bit. So you can either bring in the paper trimmer and trim off a hair's breadth, or like me, I'm just going to use my snips. Actually, I'm not going to use those ones. They're a little bit sticky. I think they are my old ones that I used for sticky messes. So we just need to trim it, literally a little hair, and then see if this side will fit. And if it won't, I'll show you how to do it on the paper trimmer. So you can bring it up, and then we're just going to move the edge of this to the edge of the grey area on the cutting trough, and bring back in the paper trimmer, the cutting blade, line back up at the score line and go down. And again, it will just cut you off a little piece. I know it seems a little bit, oh, that's far too fiddly, but it's such a nice card and the result is so lovely. I think it is completely worth it. So I think I peeled off more on one side than I did on the other. So sorry, let me bring it back into the shot so you can just see me tweaking little bits off left, right and centre. There we go. And then we just need to make sure that the two middle parts of the gate line up. Get rid of all those lovely little hairs. So that's the gate fold done. And then we just need to fold the mantle drape section of it. So now you've got the whole look. You've got the gate fold, you've got the piece with the mantle drape, and we've got the gate fold. So that was just to show you, you do have to sometimes work at it. The first one I did kind of, you know, because it wasn't one I was doing on the video, worked quite well. That one seemed like a struggle. So that, to be honest, was the worst one I've done. So if that's the worst it is, you'll see that it actually, the end result is worth that little bit of effort. So here we go, bringing in the one that I tweaked earlier, and then all the other pieces that go, oh my gosh, how many little slithers did I cut off? So this is the main card. And then I've got some of the lovely Florals in Bloom, one of the new designer series papers, and I have cut 2 4-inch sections in half at 2 inches, and they are 5 3/4 deep. So I'm going to put these two on the outside because we want them to meet and match in the middle. So we'll put this one on the left hand side with a nice little strawberry slush border around. And this one can go over on the right hand side, again with its lovely little border. So when we meet them in the middle, the pattern flows over. Now I am actually going to do the same on the inside, although they're so far apart, it's not really quite as noticeable. but sometimes it's just nice to know that you did that. And if there was some kind of pattern you used where you could see that it happened, why not make the effort and have the flow? So we'll pop that one on that side. Then I've got a piece of basic white for the middle, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. As always, of course, all the directions and dimensions will be on my blog, so you don't have to worry about following along and jotting them down. It will all be listed out for you. So there's that. So that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I have the 2 white pieces. Now these are 2 inches because this is 2 1/8 and 2 1/8. But these are cut down to just 4 because you'll see they're just a little bit smaller. Funny thing that looks like, you can see where it dips in. I live quite close to Staten Island, on the New Jersey side of Staten Island. And when you cross the outer bridge crossing, I don't know why the bridge is so skinny. It just is. Those of you who have experienced that, it's so funny because as you drive towards the actual piece of the bridge that goes over the water, you can see it do this literal dip in. And when I was cutting this earlier, I thought, oh, look, we've got a little bit of a Staten Island dip in there. So there we have it. The 2 inches wide by 5 3/8. 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and these are 2 inches and 2 inches, and they're only 4 wide. So again, you'll see why we had to sort of tweak that. Oop, because it's going to be going over quite a bit of thickness. Now comes the fun part for the decorating. I do just need to do 2 little bits of stamping. I've got a lot of florals and greeneries that I did earlier because you don't need to sit and watch me make many multiples of them. What I did do though was I took some of the cardstock and I actually fussy cutted a couple of the official patterns out of them to go on the inside of the card. But I do always like to show you how we did that. So I'm going to do this one first. And I think the last card I just did was very similar to that. So we'll bring in the outline. Just need a little bit of scrap paper to stamp off onto. So we'll use the outline stamp and we'll stamp it full strength and stamp it off. And then I'm going to go back and just catch the bottom 4 of the flowers to stamp it on there, and it gives a little bit of an ombre-esque look. So we'll close that down, and then the other color that's in there is the bubble bath. So I'm going to do the other part of the 2-step stamping, and I'm just going to go over that and it fills it in. And then there is a die in the floral die set, this one, and that's what I pre-cut this one out using. So that's how we got that flower. And then the other one, these lovely daisies. So again, it's a stamp off 2-step stamping. So here's the first stamp, the solid one. So we'll ink that up, stamp it off onto a scrap of paper, and then we're going to get a second refrain, the second generation. And then the inside piece, which is more the burst of the stamen inside, we'll do that full strength, and then we get the lovely 2-step look of both of those flowers. And then of course I just repeated it using the lovely new inks or the new in colors. I used the Darling Duckling for the yellow one, and then the Timid Tiger for the orange ones. And then again, using the same set, I just had like a cutting fest. I cut out this greenery, I cut out this greenery, and I did it with a lemon lime twist. So we've got lots of greenery to go on the bottom for the bit that overhangs, for the draping section. And then while I've got the stamps out and we are busy stamping, let me go ahead and do that, and then we just have the fun of assembling all the flowers. So this lovely piece, it's got like a lacy edge, I took from the textured notes, and it was this one because it was big enough to hold the greeting, which I took from Simply Said, one of my favorite word sets, just the birthday wishes. So we're going to do that in full strength strawberry slush. So we'll bring that down and stamp it just over towards the right, because we want to stick this lovely little flower on. I've got a bit of a queue in my washing station. And then the greeting for the inside, this lovely big one, is with you in mind. So I'm going to do the happy birthday. And sometimes when it's a big stamp, it's better just to lie it down, and then you know you've got it all covered, which is also the trick if you're using spots, because then you know you've covered everywhere. Oh, just need to stand up to make sure I'm lining that up straight. So there we go, a nice strawberry slush happy birthday. And let me throw everything out of my washing station so I can get such a big monster stamp in. So that's all the stamping. This obviously goes off and bees, because I'm so good at speaking English, and gets die cut, and the rest of it is really now a lovely big assembly fest. So I'm going to bring in my silicone mat, and I'm going to bring in the liquid glue, and I'm going to put some dots of ink. Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have just bundled them all together. So they're going to stick up quite far. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom of these two and all of the very bottom leaf. Just a little bit at that point and on the bottom leaf. And then you just have to be careful that when you attach them, they don't stick out too far, because when they go in the card and the card gets closed, they'll all get crushed. So just got to be aware of where the edge is. And now you can see the purpose of my, here's one I made earlier, quest. And then I'm just going to stick the other shape of greenery in. With a little bit of glue on each of those. Just little dots here and there, because most of the daisy flowers are going to go over this and hopefully help hold it in place. It's sticking to me, which is a little side point, which I know I usually mention. The silicone mat is such a great invention because it stops any of that stickiness getting onto your work surface when you've got other things you're trying to do. So these are going to go all the way down to the bottom. And I know they look a little bit messy and higgledy-piggledy right now, but like I say, we're going to be attaching so many daisies over the top of that. It's really just so there's a hint of greenery peeking out from behind. So wipe the glue off my fingers, and then let's do some sticking. So let me make sure I've got all my colours in the right order. Okay, here we go. So we're just going to put a little bit of adhesive on the back, just down at the point. It doesn't have to be everywhere on them, as long as there's enough to hold it onto the card. We just need a little bit of glue on the back of this little one, so it sticks here for the front of the belly band, and these ones are going to go on the inside of the card. There's no dimensionals needed because it's double thickness. I didn't want to overdo the fatness for it to be able to go into the envelope to get through the mail. So now we are going to stick on our flowers. So we can stick them on across the top. Whoops. The lovely strawberry slush ones can go on. And then the lovely timid tiger. So there's a nice garden of greenery is going to drape down from the mantle shelf when it's standing up. And then last but not least, we have to build the belly band. So just making sure everything's tucked in nicely and not going to get crushed. We can close the card. And this is 10 by 1 inch, this little piece of belly band. I can see this has got a little sideways slant here. And then I'm going to put a little piece of tear and tape. So we're just going to fold it gently. It doesn't have to be tight, of course, because the person who receives it needs to be able to slide it out. So I'm going to put a little piece of tear and tape that I will have cut. Now I will bring in these older snips because they've been cutting sticky stuff, and put a little piece on there and a little piece on this end. And then we can just more or less make sure that it will slide up and down. So peel the two backings off. And just line them up so they stick together. And they definitely do slide. That's nice. You don't want it so loose that it falls off, of course. And then we just need to put two little pieces of tear and tape up the middle. And it's best to put it, because we know this is wider than the belly band, it's better to put it on the band, because then there's going to be no sticky anywhere it doesn't need to be. And then we can center that up in the middle. And the belly band slides off. Just need to give it a slight curve, just a little. You don't want to bend it or anything, but just a slight curve to make it stay. So actually, let's open this one so we can see the wonderful fruits of our labor. So that's that one. This is how it looks when it's closed. And there you have it. A lovely mantle drape, gatefold mantle drape card. If you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future videos. You can always ring the bell. I thank you in advance for a thumbs up. All the directions and dimensions, as I've mentioned, will be on my blog. If you have a question or a comment, pop those in the box below and I will always get back with you. I do hope you've liked this one. I'm really taken with this card. I was like, whoa, I have to get this out and share it with my lovely stamping friends. So in the meantime, thanks so much for watching.